Om Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jeevanam Kavibhireeditam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimadadatam Bhuvi Ye Bhurida Janaha Sri Sri Ramakrishna Kathamrita Sri Makathita, the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, recorded and told by M. Sri Mahendranath Gupta, a disciple and apostle of Sri Ramakrishna. The chapter is Kolukatay Sri Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar Sange Sri Ramakrishna in Milan. Sri Ramakrishna's meeting with Vidyasagar in Calcutta. ज्ञान विज्ञान अद्वैतवाद विशिष्टाद्वैतवाद द्वैतवाद ये तीन समन्वय. In those days, the conflict between Advaita, Vishishtadvaita, Advaita was at the peak. Series of literature came out by the scholars and people who were devoted to these various schools. Trying to defeat the arguments of the opponents. It's called Khandana. Khandana means defeat, the cut. Mandana means a support. So the whole country was absorbed in Khandana, Mandana, trying to refute, trying to defeat, and some trying to support. So much so, as Swami Vivekananda once said, so much of vituperative literature came to be composed, which is the shame of any country. So the avatara comes to reconcile, comes to create harmony among the paths. And as Ramakrishna beautifully narrated, Tini Ananto tar patho Ananto. He is infinite, and the paths leading to this infinite is also infinite. He cannot be known by this small mind or the intellect. And however much the mind may try to delve into his real nature and try to understand, the understanding of the mind is very, very little and puny. This puny mind cannot fully understand the infinite reality. So here is an interesting conversation, dialogue between Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar and Sri Ramakrishna, where from his own realization, the Samanvaya Acharya that Sri Ramakrishna was, after Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, reconciles these various viewpoints. Je Samannay koreche she khub lok. In the Kathamrita, there is a statement by Sri Ramakrishna, a person who has reconciled, a person who creates harmony, he is a real seeker of truth. Swami Vivekananda spoke these memorable words, the last words in the Parliament of Religions of Chicago, 27th of September 1893. They started on the 11th of September. Then he said, upon the banner of every religion will soon be written, in spite of resistance, help and not fight, assimilation and not destruction, harmony and peace and not dissension. So come together, reconcile. Harmony and peace and not dissension, no conflict. How much of bloodshed, how much of war, crusades have taken place because of religion. My religion is right, your religion is wrong, and my religion has been criticized and your religion has been eulogized. My, and my God and your God. So here is Ramakrishna sitting there, Samanvaya Acharya, the great prophet of harmony in the modern age. Let's listen to what he says. Sri Ramakrishna says, ঋষিদের ব্রহ্মজ্ঞান হয়েছিল, বিষয় বুদ্ধির লেশমাত্র থাকলে এই ব্রহ্মজ্ঞান হয় না. Rishis realized Brahman, they attained Brahmajnana, the knowledge of Brahman. How can you attain Brahmajnana? Even if you have a trace of sense enjoyment, the proclivity and the desire for enjoyment, you will not be able to attain Brahmajnana. Vishaya buddhir leshamatra thakre. Vishaya buddhi, Vishaya the sense objects. The desire from the sense objects, even if it is there just a little, even a trace of it, infinitesimal part of the mind, even that craves for sense enjoyment, then Brahmajnana is just not possible. ঋষিরা কত খাটত, সকালবেলা আশ্রম থেকে চলে যেত, একলা সমস্ত দিন ধ্যান চিন্তা করত, রাত্রে আশ্রমে ফিরে এসে কিছু ফলমূল খেত. How hard the rishis used to struggle to realize Brahman. Nothing is accomplished without hard struggle. So they used to go from their ashrama into the dense forest and meditate the whole day. Think of the infinite, vast, indescribable, indivisible Satchidananda Brahman. And in the night they used to come back and just eat some fruits. Dekha, shona, chua. এই সব বিষয় থেকে মনকে আলাদা রাখত, তবে ব্রহ্মে বোধে বোধ হতো. Very interesting statement. দেখা, seeing, shuna, hearing, chua, touch. Shabda, sparsha, rupa, rasa, gandha. The five senses which are craving for the sense objects, their respective sense objects. The eye, chakshu, is craving for darshana. The tongue, rasanendriya, is craving for various tastes, aswadana. The ear, the darshanendriya, is deeply craving for varieties of sounds. The nose, the ghanendriya, is craving for varieties of sweet fragrance and smells. And tvak, the sparshanendriya, is craving for pleasurable touch. Sparsha, rupa, rasa, gandha. Shabda, sparsha, shabda. Sparsha, rupa, rasa, gandha. These are the five cravings of the sense objects. These are called sukshma mahabhuta, sukshma bhuta, tanmatras. And the mind, when it gets attached to this, through sparsha, everything is ultimately sparsha. When I see this picture, it's also the light coming and falling on my eyes. When I hear a sound, the sound waves coming and striking my eardrum or tympanum. When I eat something and taste it, that's also a touch. When I smell, that's also a touch. And the skin, of course, is the touch. So all the various sense enjoyments arising out of touch, all of them are transient, ephemeral. Ehi samsparshaja bhoga dukkha yonaya evate. All these sense enjoyments are only a source of great dukkha or suffering or misery. Adyantavanta konte yanateshu ramate buddha. They have a beginning and they have an end, and therefore Buddha, an enlightened person, does not relish these sense enjoyment anymore. Bahyasparshe svasaktatma vindatyatmaniyat sukham sabrahma yoga yuktatma sukham akshayam Bhagavad Gita. Bahyasparsheshu asaktatma. A person is completely detached from external touch. What happens to him? He turns inward. Atmani sukham vindati. He gets tremendous joy within. Brahma yoga yukta atma. He is deeply connected to Brahman within. What does he gain? What does he realize? Akshayam sukham ashnute. Undecaying, imperishable, undiminishing, infinite joy he enjoys, which is the joy of the Atman, the Ananda of the Atman. Three kinds of joy are usually mentioned. One is the Vishayananda, the Ananda which comes from the various objects, sense objects. Senses coming into contact with sense objects, Vishayananda. Higher than that is Bhajanananda, Kirtanananda, the joy which comes from singing the glory of God by doing sadhana, bhajana, meditation, cultivation of high thought, spiritual activity. Joy that you get in that is Bhajanananda. Higher than even that is Brahmananda. Brahmananda is absorption in the infinite Brahman. Vishayananda, Bhajanananda, and Brahmananda. These are the three levels of joy which has been spoken about, and a person who is eager for realization of the ultimate, of the infinite and the absolute, he does not delight in the lower pleasures of senses, and even the pleasure of the intellect. Intellectual pleasure may be superior to the sense pleasure, but even that is inferior in comparison with the pleasure, the joy that one comes in delight which one receives by absorption in Brahman, by realizing Brahman, Brahmajnana, Atmajnana, Bhagavan Labha, Bhagavad Darshana. So many different names are used, all of them mean the same thing. Realizing your real nature as Shuddha, Buddha, Nitya, Mukta, Ananda Swarupa. You are eternally free, eternally awakened, eternally pure. You are the nature of infinite joy. Bodhe bodh kurto. This is a very interesting phrase which he uses. Vishayate ke mon ke alada dekhto, rakhto. They used to keep the mind completely away from all sense contact, sense pleasure. Tobe Brahma ke bodhe bodh kurto. Then they used to realize Brahman in the core of their being. Bodhe bodh. That means realizing Brahman deeply, intimately, intensely, realizing that Brahman as one's own self or the Atman. It's very difficult to translate bodhe bodh. Bodha is realization, consciousness. Bodhe bodh, that means consciousness in consciousness. What does it mean? That means you are saturated by the consciousness of Brahman and you are living and having your being in Brahman and you get soaked in Brahman as it were. Kalite annagata pran, deha buddhi jaina. This is repeatedly Sri Ramakrishna says it in the Gospel, in the Kathamrita. In Kali Yuga, a man's life is centered on food. Annagata, that means the body and the food which nourishes the body, food and drink. These are things on which the entire life of a person in Kali Yuga rests. Why does he say this? Because in this age when you are so much attached to your body and mind, to say that I am that infinite self, Soham, I am God, I am the Atman, I am Brahman, Aham Brahmasmi, ye avasthai Soham bola bhalo noy. It is not proper for a person who is attached to the body to say that I am Brahman. Without knowing that the I which is being spoken of here is not that which is attached to the body or the mind, but beyond the body, beyond the mind, beyond the senses, there's a pure consciousness which is being spoken of here as I. Unless you realize that, asserting Soham, I am Brahman, is not proper in Kali Yuga. There's a story in the Upanishad of Asura and Deva going to Prajapati, Brahma. Then he told both of them, you want the Atman? What you see in your right eye, Dakshinakshi, that is the Atman. So both of them went and saw themselves the reflection of their own bodies in the waters. And Virochana saw his own body as reflected in the water and concluded this body is Atman. And he was trying to nourish the body, he was trying to pamper the body, to feed it well, to dress well and so on. Whereas Indra, being a Devata, he also initially thought the body is Brahman, that's what Prajapati said. After some time he reflected. This Atman, this Brahman is imperishable, constant, without birth or death. But how can this body be identified with the Atman? This body is perishable, this body is born and it dies. It can't be this. He went on cogitating, reflecting on what he heard, Shravana, then Manana, cogitation, reflection, through Nididhyasana, Samadhi, getting absorbed in the truth, he realized that he is that infinite consciousness beyond the body and beyond the mind. So the problem in Kali Yuga, as Ramakrishna points out, you are so much attached to your body, and being attached to the body to say, I am that infinite Brahman, may mislead you into thinking that this body is Brahman. So, as long as you have not got rid of the body idea, Atma, Dehatma Buddhi is a standard phrase in Vedanta. Deha is not the Atman. So having Atma Buddhi in the Deha, thinking this Deha is the Atman, Deha Atma Buddhi, however much you may struggle to realize Brahman, saying that I am that Brahman is not proper, is not good. When it is not good, as long as the idea of the body is so powerful, and in Kali Yuga, this is quite strong because in Kali Yuga, a man's life depends upon food. Annagata prana. সবাই করা যাচ্ছে, সবই করা যাচ্ছে, আবার আমি ব্রহ্ম বলা ঠিক নয়। যারা বিষয় ত্যাগ করতে পারে না, যাদের আমি কোনো মতে যাচ্ছে না, তাদের আমি দাস, আমি ভক্ত, এই অভিমান ভালো। ভক্তিপথে থাকলেও তাকে পাওয়া যায়। Because normally we cannot so easily get rid of this body idea. We are so much attached to the body and the mind, so much attached to our ideas. For such people like us, saying that I am Brahman is not proper. For those who cannot give up the attachment to the senses and the enjoyment of the sense objects, for whom the idea of I, this unripe I, as Ramakrishna used to say, this ego does not get eliminated, for them the better path will be, let the I remain as a devotee of God, let the I remain as a servant of God. This is better. So he gives a beautiful path for people like us who are attached to the body and the mind. He says the ego which is unripe. What is the unripe ego? Unripe ego which says, I am the body, my body is so beautiful, my senses are fine, I have a powerful intellect, and I can speak well, I can write well, I am an author, I am a poet, I am a singer, I am a very efficient worker, I. This I is the unripe I. You can't get rid of this I so easily, so what you do is, mode period out, Ramakrishna's statement, give it a turn, give it a twist towards something higher. What do? This I, which thinks of itself as the doer of an action, as a poet, as a writer, as a speaker, as an efficient worker, as male, female, possessing a beautiful body, possessing a beautiful voice, that I converted into a devotee I, converted into a servant I. I am the servant of God. I am speaking now as He makes me speak. I am talking about Him. I am preaching the truths of Vedanta. I am talking about the great truths embedded in this extraordinary scripture in the modern times called the Sri Ramakrishna Kathamrita, the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. So the I still exists, but it remains as the devotee of God, remains as a servant of God. It's called Das Ami, Das meaning servant, Ami means I. Bhakta Ami, Bhakta means a devotee, Ami means I. Then that kind of I is not harmful because ultimately that I will lead you to God. This is the path of bhakti. Sri Ramakrishna used to say in his colloquial, beautiful Bengali expression, Thak shala das Swami hoye. Shala is an expression which Ramakrishna often used. In Bengali, it's a slang. Just to scold somebody, just to slight somebody, you call him Shala. What are you doing? So in English, they have translated the rascal because they don't have any other word. Shala actually means a brother-in-law, wife's brother. Somehow it has come to be used as a derogatory expression, and sometimes it is used as an affectionate expression also. Somehow you want to affectionately call somebody, you can use this word also. But those who are not used to Bengali, better to avoid this word. Some sadhus used to say it's a very sacred word. Why? Sri Ramakrishna himself used it, so it's a kind of mantra. These are funny jokes. So, Thakshala daswami hoye. Let the rascal I remain as a servant of God. Thakshala bhaktami hoye. Let the rascal I remain as the devotee of God, as a servant of God. This is called the path of bhakti. The I is not completely eliminated, but it can't be eliminated so easily as long as a person has attachment to the body. Since it is not possible to get rid of the attachment to the body so easily, in this Kali Yuga, where a man's life depends on food by which the body is nourished, it is safer and better and easier to follow the path of bhakti so that I can be subjugated, if not fully eliminated, and sublimated into the devotee ego, servant ego. Bhakti pate thakleo take pawa jai. Even in the path of bhakti, you can get him. Why do you say even? Because normally people think I am a great jnani, I should go in the path of jnana. It's highly prestigious to think you are a jnani. Many people say, I don't go to the temples, I don't do puja, I meditate on my higher self. All that is true, sir. Have you got rid of your desires for the senses? So much of Vishayasakti, attachment to the sense objects, is present in us, and then talking big about jnana is only sheer hypocrisy. Remember, the I has to be chastened and chastened. Again and again it is snubbed and ultimately eliminated. This is what the avatara does. Avatara, the incarnation of God, a divine manifestation, crushes the ego of the devotee, crushes the ego of the follower. He is darpahari. He takes away, eliminates the ego. Remember the famous incident? Rani Rasmani had gone to the temple. Sri Ramakrishna just finished his puja, perhaps. Then Rani Rasmani requested, can you sing a song for me on Kali? With so much of devotion, in such extraordinarily melodious voice, Sri Ramakrishna singing. At that time, Rani Rasmani suddenly a thought crossed her mind. What will happen to the court case which we are fighting? Will we lose or win? Sri Ramakrishna immediately saw the unspoken thought and slapped her. Ekhane shei chinta. You are thinking about your court case even here, in the presence of the Divine Mother Kali, while listening to the divine music? Think of that. Sri Ramakrishna at that time, Gadadhar, he was just an ordinary pujari in the temple, a worshipper, pujak, getting a very small amount of salary for which he said, I will not sign and accept this salary. And is the queen of the whole estate. Rani, for her to be slapped by Sri Ramakrishna in the presence of everybody, it's a terrible hue and cry everywhere. People started assembling, security breach, as you now say. People said, he has become mad, now he should be thrown out, punish him, and so on. What was the reaction of Rani Rasmani? Extraordinarily noble, divine lady, Parshada Sri Ramakrishna, What great part she played in the divine play, the Leela of Sri Ramakrishna. She said, stop. Nobody should harm Gadadhar. Nobody should harm this Pujari. He did the right thing. What does Ramakrishna do through that slap? He is crushing the ego of Rani Rasmani. Rani Rasmani being so pious, so gentle, so devoted, so full of deep attitude of surrender, the Avatara thought, what little ego is still remaining, that should be crushed, pounded through the slap. Meditate in this incident. Avatara comes to crush us, crush our ego. We get upset and unhappy when somebody is cold, somebody vilifies us, maligns us. What's happening now? Why am I being treated like this? When somebody speaks ill of you, slaps you as it were, remember he is not doing it. The Antaryami within, the indwelling God within, the indwelling inner regulator called Ramakrishna, he is impelling him to slap you, to slander you, to malign you, so that your ego gets reduced, pounded, ultimately totally eliminated. All the slandering and scolding and ill fame that is heaped on you, in spite of your being blemishless, you take it in this light that is Ramakrishna alone, the infinite Antaryami within, who is crushing your ego. So this ego should be converted into the ripe ego. The unripe ego, that I am a scholar, I am a speaker, I am a worker, I am so-and-so, I am a rich man. That kind of unripe ego, apakva aham kachami, should now be converted into pakami, ripe ego. I am a servant of God, I am a child of God, and so on. Jnani neti neti kore vishaya buddhi tyag kore tobe brahma ke jante pare. Very carefully study these beautiful lines, so simply, directly put. He is explaining jnana and bhakti and goes to vijnana, which goes beyond the jnana bhakti, in a very simple, straightforward way. Neti neti kore jnani vishaya buddhi tyag kore. This is the path of not this, neti neti. You want to realize Brahman? What is the nature of Brahman? The scripture says, Satyam Jnanam Anandam Brahma, Vijnanam Anandam Brahma. Brahman is infinite. Yad Bhuma Vayetat Sukham Na Alpe Sukham Asti. It is Bhuma. It is vast and infinite. It is truth, Satya. It is Jnana, knowledge or consciousness. It is Ananta, infinite. It is Vijnana. It is the essence of awareness, superior infinite awareness. It is Ananda, it is joy, infinite joy. These are the characteristics of Brahman which have been spoken to you. The Acharya, your Guru says, and the scripture says. How do you go about finding it? The Jnani says, my body, is it Brahman? It can't be. No. Because it is limited, because it decays, because it's born and dies, so it can't be. My mind, is it Brahman? It can't be, because mind can constantly changes. Mind, this moment is so happy, next moment is miserable. It is so fickle, unsteady. It can't be Brahman. Eliminate this. The buddhi, can it be Brahman? No. The buddhi is also unsteady and fickle. The buddhi sometimes goes to very high thoughts of God and so on. Sometimes it comes down to enjoy the various objects. It runs after fame and name, money. So buddhi, intellect, cannot be Brahman. Go on eliminating, this can't be Brahman, that can't be Brahman, that can't be Brahman. No, no, no. Na iti is neti. Na iti, na iti, na iti. Not this, not this, not this. Go on eliminating. What remains after this process of complete and total elimination of all that is not Brahman, you realize the Brahman. This is the path of neti neti. This is so difficult to understand and explain. Let's look at Ramakrishna's simple story, a parable. This is the greatness of avatars. For people who have realized God, they can put the truth in such a simple language. Sometimes we think it is simplistic, so easy, but it is profound, deep. A young bride, recently married, is being constantly teased and taunted sweetly by the companions, the female companions. They are sitting in one corner and looking at the so many young men sitting, or the companions of the husband, and these female companions are asking the bride, "Hey, is this your husband? Who is your husband? You tell me." She is not speaking. "Is this your husband?" Pointing to a young man. She said, "No." "Then is this man your husband?" So no. Third person, is he your husband? No. When they actually point out the real husband, is it? Then she smiles with shyly and puts her head down. Fik kore heshe, chup kore thake. She smiles happily, sweetly, with so much of shyness, not able to say, "Yes, he is my husband," but she indicates and then puts her head down and keeps quiet. Sri Ramakrishna's example of neti neti. When you actually intuit the Supreme, come face to face with infinite reality, then your speech stops, your mind doesn't function, your mind is filled with joy. You can't speak anymore. That is the example of smiling sweetly with great joy and putting her head shyly. So neti neti is the path of a jnani, a man who is pursuing the path of knowledge. Eliminate. This is not Brahman. This is not Brahman. This is not Brahman. Ultimately, by eliminating all that is not Brahman, Abrahma, you realize what is Brahman. When you realize it, speech stops, the mind doesn't function anymore, and you get absorbed in that infinite reality. This is the path of Brahman, the knowledge, neti neti. He gives another example. Jamon, for example, Shidir dhap chadiye chade pahuncha na jaye. So he takes step by step, he's climbing to the roof, so many steps. Step 1, step 2, step 3. He climbs step by step by step. Why? Is this the roof, the first step? No. Then go to the second step. Is this the roof? No. Then the third step. Is this the roof? No. So ultimately you reach the roof, then you don't ask, is this the roof? Because you know intuitively that is the roof. Eliminate all the steps. Now, here comes the extraordinary perception of Sri Ramakrishna, which is perhaps his new contribution the religious and philosophical thought of the world. You can't call it totally new, but put in a language and made practical for everyday life, later on expounded as practical Vedanta by his chief disciple Swami Vivekananda. What is that? কিন্তু বিজ্ঞানী তিনি বিশেষ রূপে তার সঙ্গে আলাপ করেন, তিনি আরও কিছু দর্শন করেন। তিনি দেখেন ছাদ যে জিনিসটা তৈরি, সেই ইট চুন সুরকিতেই সিঁড়িও তৈরি। But you reach the roof by eliminating all that is not roof. Reach the roof and look at the steps. Oh, these are the steps I eliminated as not the roof. But what is it made of? The roof is made of the same materials like bricks. Then in those days cement was not there. They used lime and the various materials for construction of the building. The same materials of which the roof is made are the materials of which the steps are also made. So you penetrate into the nature of the roof and the nature of the steps and see that it is the same. First go through the elimination process. Not this, not this, not this, neti, neti, neti. Then reach the roof. Then you say iti, iti, iti. This. What I rejected in the beginning as not the roof, I see that it is also made of the same material in essence. When you realize the essence of truth, which is the ultimate, then I realize that the truth is pervading everything. There is nothing which is not truth. Satyameva jayate nanritam satyena pantha vitato devayanaha. Mundakopanishad. Truth alone triumphs and not untruth. The path to spiritual progress, the path to the infinite, Devayana, the spiritual path is laid by truth and truth and truth alone. The beginning is truth, the middle is truth, the end is truth. At every point it is truth and truth alone. He eliminated the steps as non-truth, untruth, they are not Brahman. Ultimately reach the roof and see that the steps are also made of the same materials like brick and lime and so on, of which the roof is also made. And therefore, everything is the same infinite cosmic reality shining as all that exists. All that exists is only Brahman. Sarvam khalvidam Brahma. Neti neti kore যাকে ব্রহ্ম বলে বোধ হয়েছে তিনি জীব জগৎ হয়েছেন। বিজ্ঞানী দেখে যিনি নির্গুণ তিনি সগুণ। These are all extraordinarily great spiritual and philosophical truths. So much of conflict between Nirguna Brahman and Suguna Brahman, God with form, God without form, God with qualities, God without qualities. So much of acrimony and so much of rancor and so much of misunderstanding. So Ramakrishna solves very, very simply. He says, Neti neti kore jake Brahma bole bodh hoyeche. So eliminate all this, ultimately you come to Brahman. That Brahman is also manifesting as Jiva Jagat. Jiva Jagat hoyechen. He has become the Jiva, he has become the Jagat. Jiva Jagat should be eliminated to reach Brahman. Ultimately you realize that Jiva and Jagat are the same. In the beginning, if you start asserting that this is also Brahman, this is also Brahman, you will be making a mistake because you do not know what is Brahman. You will be confusing yourself into thinking all this is material world is also Brahman. You will realize it only when you eliminate, reject all that is not Brahman according to your understanding at the moment. then reach that state in which you see the Brahman and look back and see the same Brahman is pervading everywhere. Brahmaivedam amritam purastad brahma paschad brahma dakshinatas chottarena adhastodham cha prasritam brahmaivedam vishwamidam varishtham. Mundakopanishad. Remarkable verse. Brahman is above, Brahman is below, Brahman is to the right, Brahman is to the left, Brahman is in front, Brahman is at the back. And the entire world is only manifestation of Brahman and Brahman alone. This is the ultimate realization called Vijnana. Sri Ramakrishna says, a jnani rejects through neti neti, ultimately realizes that the Brahman is the ultimate reality. A bhakta asserts that I am a child of God, still retains the ego. Then he says, when jnana bhakti is combined, then you have a combination of iti iti and neti neti. Eliminate the whole thing, realize Brahman as none of these jiva and jagat, the living beings, the non-living beings, and the whole world of nature. This is not God. Eliminate it. Then after realizing Brahman and its nature, you see the same Brahman has become the jiva and the jagat. It is after the realization of Brahman through neti neti, you come to the realization that the same Brahman is present everywhere as jiva and jagat. This extraordinary experience comes to you and you realize that infinite consciousness as your own real self. This is the experience of a Vijnani, Vishesha Jnani. A Jnani goes through the path of elimination, neti neti. An Ajnani does not even know that God exists, he is not interested. But a Vijnani, after having realized God through the process of elimination, reaching the real nature of God and delving deep into His divine nature, getting soaked as it were in God, completely getting merged in God, becoming one with Him, reappearing with a chaste, pure, refined, ripe ego as it were, remains as a devotee of God. He is a Vijnani. Sri Ramakrishna gives another very beautiful example. A person wants to prepare fire and cook food. He wants to light the fire. A person who does not know that fire can be generated by burning firewood is an Ajnani. He is an ignorant person who does not know. And a Jnani is one who knows that fire can be ignited and brought out from the firewood. He is a Jnani. But a Vijnani is one who lights the fire, using the firewood ignites, then cooks food through that, eats that food, becomes fully nourished. He is a Vijnani. He used to say, a Jnani eliminates everything and remains with God who is impersonal and infinite. Ashabdam asparsham arupam avyayam tatharasam nityam agandhavachayat anadjanantam mahatav param dhruvam jayatan mrityumakhat pramuchyate. Kathopanishad. Ashabdam asparsham arupam avyayam. That means neti neti, neti neti. He is not Shabda, he is not Sparsha, he is not touch, he is not sound. Eliminate everything. Then he comes face to face with Brahman, the infinite ocean of Satchidananda, and delves into it, it gets lost. Ramakrishna used to give the example, a salt doll went to measure the depths of the ocean. What will happen to it? It melts away, becomes one with the ocean. The Jnani, Brahmaveda Brahmaiva Bhavati, becomes one with Brahman. But A Vijnani reappears. How does it happen is a mystery, logically inexplicable. By the will of God, by divine will, those of these jnanis who have been commissioned by God to teach people, they reappear with a defined, refined, and pure, chaste, ripe ego, as it were, which God has kept in them, and teach people. He is a Vijnani. Ramakrishna used to say, Shankaracharya Vidyarami Rekhe Chilen. Shankaracharya kept the ego of knowledge. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu kept the ego of a devotee, that I am a bhakta, I am a devotee of God, and so on. So after reaching the acme of realization of God in both in the personal and impersonal aspects, as saguna and nirguna, with qualities and without qualities, as with form and without form, sakara and nirakara, as infinite and finite, this whole world of finitude is also the infinite God is peeping through this. As Rabindranath beautifully sang, Shashimir Made Ashim Kindu Jana Ukimarchen. As if the infinite, limitless entity, the infinite spirit is peeping through this finite world, as it were. Having known God in all the aspects, finite and the infinite, absolute and relative, saguna, nirguna, sakara, nirakara, and how many more aspects besides, he remains as a devotee of God, as a man of knowledge, like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or Shankara respectively, enjoying the bliss of God and sharing this bliss with the entire universe. Vasantaval lokahitam charantaha. For the lokahita, for the good of the world, they are awakening the spiritual consciousness of the entire humanity through their very presence and talk. This is what the great avatars did. Remaining in Vijnana, which Sri Ramakrishna identified as Bhava Mukha. This requires a very deep reflection and thought. Even infinitesimally, if you can grasp this idea of a Vijnana, special knowledge, and a Bhava Mukha, the threshold of being, then we will be able to have an intuitive understanding of the mind of Sri Ramakrishna. A treatise on the psychology of the incarnation of God. This is what Swami Tapasyan used to call Sri Sri Ramakrishna Lila Prasanga. You have to intuitively understand the depths of Sri Ramakrishna's realizations, even infinitesimally. This is what is meant by meditation on Sri Ramakrishna. Meditating on Sri Ramakrishna in your heart, Hridaya Kamala Madhye Rajitam Nirvikalpam, etc. we chant and meditate. That means you are participating in the being of Sri Ramakrishna, entering and delving into his mind and consciousness, and not understanding through the mind, but remaining one with his consciousness to be able to taste the divine bliss which he is enjoying in the state of Vijnana or Bhava Mukha. Om Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanukampa Dhrita Vigraham Vai Ishavataram Parameshamidyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namamaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.